Now that you all watched this video, right? Go watch it. I guarantee you'll learn something you didn't know before. Anyway, now that you watched that video, let's cover some tips and best practices when it comes to building those nodes.
What'd he say his name was?
Gebatron.
As we learned in this video, seriously watch it, you automatically lose any nodes that are in territory that is lost to the enemy. This means we are going to want our nodes built as far back as possible to make sure we are gaining our resources consistently over the course of the match, and so we don't have to rebuild them multiple times. We also want to build our nodes as early as possible to make sure we are gaining as much as we can. There are different ways to accomplish these goals, so let's talk about the different methods of building nodes and the different benefits and drawbacks that go along with those methods. First, let's talk about the solo method. Here you spawn into an HQ with the support role. Drop your supply box and your explosive box if you have the ammo carrier loadout. Make sure you are dropping these within 50 meters of where you ultimately want your nodes. Then you redeploy, switch to the engineer role, and spawn back in. Place all 3 of your node blueprints. Then begin building the manpower node first. We have to build manpower first to benefit from the cooldown bonus it provides to our supply box. But before you finish, remember to stop and reset the automatic 3-minute dismantle timer on your other 2 blueprints by hammering them at least twice each. We have to do this before we use our supplies, as we can't hammer blueprints if there are no supplies available. Then finish your manpower node. Now lay your 2 AP mines. Then rearm from the explosive box you set out earlier and place the other 2. Once finished, go ahead and redeploy and switch roles back to the support role. Once your supplies are available, lay them down. Now reset the timer on one blueprint and build the other. I usually build munitions second. And finally, finish the last node once your supplies are ready again. So what are the benefits of this method? It's self-contained, which can be nice. It doesn't require much, if any, coordination or cooperation to get it done. It also allows you to build your first node quicker, like you don't have to wait for the warm-up period to be over or anything. It also doesn't cost the team any resources, as in the commander doesn't need to spend fuel to get you a supply truck. And you get to place all of your mines. What are the drawbacks? Well, it's tedious, spawning and respawning, then just waiting for that last supply box with nothing to do. Some players find this method immersion breaking or just generally not fun. It also requires both the squad support and engineer roles to be available, which can be a challenge if you are playing with randoms. And if you do find yourself in that situation, then you will have to coordinate a little bit, which shouldn't be news to anyone in a game that greatly benefits from coordination, but you get the idea. In the second method, we are going to be using a supply truck. I highly recommend not taking the auto-spawn supply truck, as I think it's better used to build garrisons close to the front right away at match start. However, do ask your squad leader to have the commander spawn a supply truck ASAP for you. Trucks only have a 1-minute cooldown, so it won't take long. We will talk about where to ask for your truck a little bit later in the video. Okay, now we are in our truck, but you'll notice we can't drop our supplies just anywhere. This varies a little by game mode, but in Warfare, you can't drop supplies from a truck anywhere behind the first 2 columns or rows, depending on map orientation. So how do we build nodes back here if we can only drop supplies past here? We drive our truck just past this line, drop our supplies, then go back past the line to build our nodes. Now this method is what I call the conventional wisdom. This is the advice normally given when people ask about building nodes. So what's so good about it? Well, it's quick, it's easy and efficient. There's no redeploying involved. We have all our supplies in one drop, so we don't have to coordinate much with other players. We can share this truck with another engineer or an officer and make it even more efficient, or continue to use it in other ways. But it comes with some drawbacks too. The first drawback is predictability. Since this is the conventional wisdom, one of the very first things I do when playing as Recon is go down this line, and it never fails that I will find nodes. Maybe not all of them, but I will find some. It also cuts your build radius in half, meaning less ability to spread your nodes out, and I think that more often than not, you should be spreading your nodes out. We'll talk more about this later, but this method limits, or at least artificially limits, the potential area you can build your nodes in. It also costs your team 100 fuel for the truck. Not that that's the end of the world, as you'll likely want a couple supply trucks early game anyway, but still. Another method I'll talk about isn't much of a method at all, and that's just opportunity building. This is just when your team needs a node and you build one quick wherever you can find supplies, whether it's a good spot or not. The benefit here is that you can get a node up after your team lost one or whatever, but the drawback being that you don't get a say over where that is. This method has its place, I suppose, but try to avoid it with a little coordination. Then what I think is the best method is simply partnering up with your support player or players and build with them. You can even swap roles back and forth to get it done faster, or even get twice as many nodes up in the same amount of time. Massive benefits, with the only real drawback being that it takes some coordination. I'll just note here that you can ask your commander for supply drops to help build nodes, but drops are only 100 supplies each, so you'll need 2 of them to build all of your nodes. You could get some resistance from your commander, who may prefer to just spawn you a supply truck instead and be done with it, but that's between you and your commander. Dropping some supplies in your HQ is something I recommend commanders do in the video at the top right, so check that out, but moving on. Just a couple more things to cover before we get into the tips part of the video. Some of you may be thinking, wait a minute, if I place all my nodes in the rear, how is anyone going to benefit from the cooldown times that the manpower and munitions nodes provide? Shouldn't I place those nodes closer to the front? As stated earlier, the conventional wisdom is to place them in the rear so they aren't lost as territory changes hands. Most people don't think the cooldown bonuses provide enough benefit to warrant the risk, and I tend to agree. Let's talk about it in degrees of usefulness. The fuel node provides no special benefits, so it doesn't pay to build it anywhere other than your HQ area, period. The munitions node reduces cooldown times on all ammo, explosives, and medical boxes. These boxes are rarely seen on the field and even more rarely used, so I think it's a very limited benefit to build a munitions node close to the front. My recommendation is to not do it, simply because munitions is probably the most used resource. The commander orders that rely on munitions are some of the most useful, and commanders tend to use them a lot. Couple this with munitions being consumed by artillery and AT guns, and you're going to want your munitions gain to be high and steady all game long. The node that is probably the most useful is the manpower node, since it reduces cooldown on supply boxes. These supplies can be used for garrisons near the front, defenses, repair stations, and maybe even the very node you'll have to rebuild. This is just me, but when I play commander, I don't mind seeing a manpower node on the front. I tend to use manpower less than munitions, so I feel I can afford to have a less reliable income of manpower over the course of a match. But like I said, that's just me. Keep in mind that the HQ spawn timer is only 10 seconds, so if your manpower node is back there, support players can spawn at HQ, redeploy, and be back at the front within a short period of time with the benefit of the cooldown bonus. Squads can also rotate players through the support role for faster access to supplies. Just saying, there are other ways to get supplies quickly without the cooldown bonus at the front. If you are an engineer that chooses to place these nodes in more dangerous locations, then think about not changing roles so you are available to quickly rebuild a node if it falls. I would also recommend having a dedicated support player or players in your squad before considering this. And lastly, try to keep your nodes out of the strong point proper. Strong points will eventually be bombed, and enemies will always be trying to enter the strong point, so keeping nodes out of the strong point proper will help them survive longer even when closer to the front. Whether or not all this trouble is worth the benefit is up to you, but I'll leave you with a final statement on the topic. Personally, I almost never build my nodes anywhere other than the rear area. However, I always appreciate having one near the front when playing other roles. Take what you will from that. If you don't like the current meta of building nodes in the rear where players can't benefit from them, then check out the video at the top right for some proposals on how to improve this aspect of the game. Also, make sure to subscribe or even become a member so you can get early access to videos just like this one. Okay, now let's get into general tips. Tip number 1, avoid high traffic areas. This is my advice generally, but it does come with a caveat. Avoid placing nodes in areas where you anticipate a lot of activity, especially strong points. We already talked about this, so let's move on. Let's say you are asking for a supply truck and looking to build nodes that way. I always decide where to have this spawn by looking at our strong point layout and use that to help me infer where the least amount of enemy activity will potentially be. In this example, we have a center strong point with the second one north of it. I can anticipate more activity here, so I'll ask for the truck to be spawned in the south HQ. In this example, all our strong points are in the south, so I'll simply ask for the truck at the far opposite northern HQ. Now we can drive out and build our nodes in an area that is out of the way for the enemy. I typically avoid placing nodes in the central HQ area, as enemy recon will likely be active here, combating your artillery. The same advice goes for building without the truck. While it's a good idea to place your nodes in such a way where players spawning into an HQ can utilize the cooldown mechanic, it's still beneficial to place them in low traffic areas. Now, I usually try to avoid building nodes in the HQ containing the active strongpoint. While this line is the first place I look for enemy nodes, this area is the immediate second place I go. But having a manpower node here can come in handy for support players if and when you get pushed back this far and find yourself short on garrisons. If you do decide to place nodes here, make sure to keep an eye on them, which leads me to tip number 2. Build, but don't forget. A lot of players build nodes, then switch out roles for the XP gain and never think about nodes again all game. Don't be that guy. Instead, make sure you are regularly checking the map to make sure your nodes are still there. Not only will this help you know when you need to go rebuild them so your team stays stocked up on resources, but it also means you don't miss out on XP gains throughout the match. Always keep an eye on the nodes you built, or all nodes for that matter. 3. Spread them out if possible. Most of the examples in this video I didn't show this, but spreading your nodes out means they are harder to find, and if the enemy recon finds one, they don't automatically find all of them. Engineers will often place nodes near each other simply because it's quick and easy, and that just means it's quick and easy for the enemy too. Spread out nodes also means that one satchel won't be taking out multiple nodes at once. 4. Reserve supplies. If using a supply truck, drop a supply box somewhere so you can quickly get new nodes up in the event your old nodes are found and dismantled at some point in the match. This can help you avoid lapses in XP gain and avoid the headache of coordinating with other players to rebuild nodes later. You have 2 boxes in the truck, so you might as well drop both of them. Speaking of trucks, 5. Don't just abandon your supply truck. I like to drive it back to the HQ crane, fill the truck back up, maybe I'll redeploy to switch roles, then I drive the truck wherever I think supplies are needed. Get a little extra XP, all while helping the team out. If I feel like getting into the fight quicker and I don't want to drive truck, I'll just fill it back up and then park it near an HQ repair station for the next player. Whatever you choose, just try not to leave a truck out in the middle of nowhere that could otherwise be a benefit to your team. 6. Mines. Consider mining your nodes, especially if you are going to switch roles after building them. Mines won't make your nodes harder to find, but they will make it more costly for the enemy to dismantle them. You may even notice the kill in your stats, giving you a heads up that your nodes might be in trouble. If placing nodes with a support player, ask them to switch to the ammo carrier loadout if possible, so you can resupply on mines. More XP for the both of you. 7. Blend them in with the environment. When possible, try to find areas where there is already a lot of clutter and similar structures to make it more difficult to spot your nodes. This is good advice for building garrisons and OPs too. I don't normally recommend building your nodes directly in a friendly HQ, but sometimes you can blend a node in here nicely. 8. Barbed wire. If spreading your nodes out isn't an option, you can always surround them in barbed wire to make them difficult to access. You can do the triangle method, or use less barbed wire by placing your nodes against a building or hedge. This may make a recon player move on, but be aware that it isn't foolproof. One method for the enemy to bypass this is to build their OP right next to your wire, then respawn until they spawn inside your defenses. Try to make this process frustrating for them with some mines inside and out. 9. Play with a friend or friends. This will make coordinating at the start of a match much smoother. If you and 2 other friends do some role swapping, you'll be able to get all 3 sets of nodes up before anyone else on the team. The XP you'll all gain will stack, and you'll get massive career XP gains if you all stay in the same squad. 10. Tip 10 is all on you. What's your best tip when it comes to nodes? Let us know down in the comments. Now, I know some people may disagree with some of the things I've said here, like saying it's okay to have a manpower node closer to the front, or to generally avoid building nodes in the HQ that contains a strong point. But I don't like giving all or nothing advice. There is nuance to Hell Let Loose. For example, building nodes in this HQ area with the strong point works great for competitive community games because you aren't allowed to dismantle nodes in competitive. But in public matches, you can dismantle them, and nodes here will be found by any recon player worth their weight in potting soil. So just try to keep those nuances in mind. Also keep in mind that none of the advice given here is a guarantee that your nodes will be safe all match long. That's why tip number 2, or checking in on your nodes frequently, is important. Most of the advice given here is to help reduce risk, not eliminate it. I mean, even surrounding your nodes in barbed wire won't stop players that know what they're doing, and you watch Gebatron Gaming, so you know what you're doing. Alright, make sure to put your node advice down in the comments. Make sure to check out the 2 videos on screen now to learn more about resources and nodes, or to hear more about some changes that I propose on how resources and nodes should work. I hope you learned something or got some fresh perspective, and if you did, go ahead and subscribe and pull the trigger on that like button. Plenty of ways to support what I do here in the description, and make sure to check for a pinned comment, as that's where I'll put any updates or great advice from you all. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.